everything is recorded about us forever, and we could say, and I could tell you what opinion you had on a certain matter 20 years ago, or I could tell you what you liked or what you did not like 10 minutes ago. It is more and more acceptable that this changes, that this becomes more fluent. You also have the case of that a certain identity may change its hosts, or in a way that identities are not really forced to stay at one human organism. So you have more and more, for example, the case of fake identities in social networks, where you can, which start out as jokes, or which start out as a way of identity theft to politically hurt someone, for example. But more and more people really take this supposed play very seriously and really try to enact what they think someone could be, or what someone could say about a certain matter. And this to a degree that you can actually rely on this fake identity just as much as you can rely on your image of the true identity. So, for example, you have artists or politicians, philosophers also, and so on, who have profiles, for example, on MySpace, and they may be dead, which is sad, so you cannot get any new information about the workings of their interior intelligence anymore, but you have someone who really is very good at making a simulation of this identity, and if you get the very same answers that you get from the simulation that you would get from the real identity, it doesn't matter anymore that the biological host of this identity is dead. So in a way, I think identities should be considered something like memes that can also flow from person to person to person and can actually be considered somewhat independent of their hosts. You would no more be imprisoned in your identity. That is, you could be what you spontaneously want to be, what's fun to be, not what you supposedly are. So you would not have to be nailed down to this core identity, and people would tell you, that's unlike you, you shouldn't act in this way, or people cannot tell you, well, you should remember where you come from, because that is your one true identity that creates what you are, and that will forever be written into you. So identities becoming more volatile may mean more freedom to act the way you want to right now, and it may lead to actually losing this idea of an I as something that has to define what your actions are. It might also mean something like the end of guilt, because it's impossible to hold some person responsible for consciously doing something if that person is no more and instead is another person. So these are, I think, very utopian and ideas that are very speculative, and I am not sure that that's actually what will win ground in the next decades, but I think it's something to start at thinking about what a post-private society could look like. But of course we have more pressing matters right now, for example, in the idea of the dangers of the surveillance state. So one could say that a sign like that, which says, caution, you are under video surveillance, very clearly tells you, we gather information about you and we do it to control you. And that is certainly something that is not enhancing your personal freedom, and that is certainly something that is there to reduce your personal freedom. So some other ideas about post-privacy, exactly in connection with this problem of the surveillance state, were, for example, stated yesterday by John Gilmore when he talked about David Brin's The Transparent Society. And that is a very good book that I recommend everyone to read, and I want to also delve a little into these ideas. So, for example, you have the idea of surveillance, that is the top looking at the bottom, and the top meaning the more powerful, the one with the monopoly on the use of violence. And you have other ideas. For example, you have the ideas of surveillance, which would be basically the bottom looking also, or equivalence, which is the balance of both sides looking around them and looking at each other. So this is, for example, what happens when you watch or document actions of police. For example, the Rodney King videotape is a good example of that. and you try to make sure through that, for example, police act in a good way with people and not in a way that is unlawful and unjust. And that is actually, it's very interesting that of course violates in a way the privacy of the policeman, and you have societies where the value of transparency seems to be bigger than the value of the privacy of the policeman. But you also have, for example, in Germany, you have sometimes the case where it's argued that privacy is very, very important, and one should not give out the identification of policemen when in their action, because that would violate their privacy. Or you should not take pictures of policemen because that would violate their privacy. So here we have a case where I think many people can agree that transparency is actually more important than privacy to protect freedom. There's also another interesting case that is document yourself. In a way, do the job of the surveillance state for the surveillance state by filming yourself what you do. And that may sound very, very dark. In a way, it sounds like, well, we have internalized the control and the surveillance so much that now we are giving up even the freedom to think for ourselves, because we would even write down our thoughts, because we are the only people who can document ourselves so profoundly like that. But you have, for example, cases like Hassan Elahi, who is an Arab-American artist who had problems with the FBI, and they suspected him, and I think they would not let him fly, or they asked him, and so he missed his plane or something like that, because they suspected, well, maybe he's a terrorist, you know, he's an Arab, he looks Arab, and so very, very surely might be a terrorist. And what he did, he started to really document every single moment of his life. He lets himself track over the internet 24 hours a day. He takes pictures in very short intervals all around, so people know where he's going, who he's talking to, and so on. And in a way, that serves as an alibi, because because there's the police first, of course, knows, oh, okay, he's okay, we know about him, he went there and there, he did not interact with these suspicious characters, so we can leave him free. But you also have the situation that in a way he is, if someone would say, well, we suspect him, and because we suspect him, we are forced to, for example, imprison him to make sure that he does not run away, then he can say, well, no, I'm treated in an unjust way, because as everyone can see, I am not a suspicious character, and so in a way he uses self-documentation as a way of protection. Then, of course, this whole idea of transparency as a means for freedom, there is, I think, the most important thing is that what needs to be transparent is everything that has a certain force. So, for example, the force of surveillance. The idea that surveillance should be transparent. You should know about where the camera is and what it records and for whom it records and who reads your diary and so on. And that's a basic necessity for at least not feeling intimidated too much by surveillance. And for example, you could say open the camera feed, so we want to know what you people are seeing. You could also say, of course, open the camera feeds, because we too want to participate in the surveillance, and we want to know what our neighbor is doing in his garden. But the important thing in this case is that every case where something creates power and has power over society or in society should be transparent. And the more power something has, the more transparent it should be. So that's the idea, that freedom can actually be enhanced by transparency, and that in a case where the surveillance becomes total, the transparency should become total. So that John Gilmore yesterday talked about that would be, at least if we cannot protect ourselves from the surveillance state, then at least we should make sure that the surveillance is total, and that we can look back at the people who watch us. So he liked privacy, but he said if privacy is lost, then at least that's better than the alternative. And of course the question is if what kinds of, if in a society with this kind of transparency, would there be any secrets at all? For example, would there be military secrets? Would the state agree to say, well, okay, we watch you, but we also allow to watch us and watch, for example, what happens in our military installations or what our secret service, which would be an oxymoron in that case, does, or something like that. So, but that's still a matter that is looks somewhat gray, and where it's somewhat difficult to really become a friend of these ideas. But maybe I think one can find another more positive post-privacy perspective to the problem of surveillance, and that is control versus trust. I have forgotten whether it was Stalin or Lenin or some communist dictator said that trust is good, control is better. And I think we know that sentence. But what actually is the difference between control versus trust? And I actually think it's a difference of information. Because if you have a lack of information, that means you have something to fear, you have something to be suspicious of. That creates mistrust, and that means you feel more need to control things because things act in a way that is too complex for you to predetermine. And that means, for example, if you know that you can only view a small percentage of all the potential crimes happening, then you have watch a small percentage of crimes happening and thereby control a small percentage of crimes happening, that therefore you have to punish these few crimes that you catch, these few criminals that you catch, even more strongly to deter other criminals. So that's the idea that if you make strong punishments that will deter criminals, an idea that one can argue maybe does not work so perfectly, because criminals care more for whether they are caught or not than for what kind of punishment may wait for them in line at the end of being caught. So most criminals more think about in the lines of I think it's pretty safe doing that because there's a very, very small percentage of me getting caught, than in the way of, well, of course, the chance that I get caught is very high, but the punishment that expects me is also very little. So, and also you have to do many somewhat general or somewhat broad laws, because you have to catch many potential cases in which you do not know exactly whether they may be harmful or not, but since you know so few about because you know not very much about the situation, you are forced to provide more security by catching every possible case instead of only the few cases where really something harmful happens. So I think that a lack of information may actually in some cases lead to less information, because you have a few information and these informations are enough to make you suspicious, but actually, for example, if you would know a little more about a person, additionally to the information that you already have, you might become less suspicious towards that person, because you know, well, of course he likes to buy books about explosives and so on, but he's just a chemistry nerd and he's never done anything harmful with that. So that actually make you less suspicious and less fearful about this person. So actually, more information, that is my idea, can create more freedom through trust, because the more information you have about someone, the more reason you have to trust him. There is less reason to assume that this person might do something harmful to you if he has never done anything harmful, and if he only interacts with you in a harmless way and in a positive way. That is, the more information you have about a matter, the less you fear the matter. Ignorance creates fear, and knowledge creates trust. And so in a society where there is more information and more trust, you would actually have less need for strict control or deterrence, because as a result, first, you would catch a higher percentage of the crimes permitted, so the use of deterrence would be smaller. You would not have the case as you had in the Middle Ages, where you know you catch only 1 in 100 criminals, and the few criminals that you do catch need to be quartered and burned and so on,